Hey, you clicked on my video. Appreciate it. Now be sure to like the video and subscribe to the page. I always like to bring in reporters from the other side that have a unique perspective. And Christina Long of the Southwest Times Record, she covers the Razorbacks, but she also grew up in Arkansas. However, she graduated from Missouri, so she has a very informed but also a very unbiased opinion, and really fortunate to have her on as a guest. So, Christina, thank you so much for coming on today. How are you?
I'm good, Nick. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. So, the big story right now has to be that starting quarterback KJ Jefferson is questionable. What's been kind of the status of KJ Jefferson, not only this week, but these last few weeks? Like, what's kind of been the issue and what's been bugging him?
Yeah, so this has been kind of a weird season injury-wise for KJ. So he missed the game against Mississippi State with a concussion, and this current issue is unrelated to that. This is a shoulder issue. So he's dealing with some soreness and some bruising. We haven't been told that there's any particular, ligament, tendon, anything like that he has injured, just that he can't throw the ball without it hurting him. So he didn't throw much in practice last week ahead of Liberty, and he did start that game, and it was his worst performance in a while. He just did not look like himself. He had 2 interceptions after having 1 in the whole season before that. He wasn't the running guy that we usually see, kind of bowling people over. And there was some questions as to whether Pittman should have taken him out for a series or two, let backup quarterback Malik Hornsby come in, or even Cade Fortin, their walk-on, who they started against Mississippi State, but then benched for Hornsby. So there were questions after the game about that. Pittman said, he had thought about it, but decided to stick with KJ after talking with offensive coordinator Kendall Briles, and they stuck with KJ for that whole game. On Monday, Pittman said that KJ's feeling better this week, that he would throw at practice on Monday, and that if he did, if he was throwing Monday, that he would feel a lot better about Saturday. And then today, Pittman spoke to us again and said that KJ did throw quite a bit on Monday, looked a lot better and felt a lot better than he did last week. And then Tuesday did not throw very much because his arm was not feeling right after having thrown on Monday. So now it's a question of what they're going to do. And he said today that he has 2 decisions to make, and that is 1, whether KJ will play at all, if he will be feeling well enough to play in this game. And 2, if he will start. So we really don't know if we're going to see Jefferson at all. We don't know if he's going to start. Hornsby would presumably start, given how Fortin's start didn't go well against Mississippi State. So Hornsby would be the option we're looking at if KJ does not start.
Okay, so then that begs the question, how does the Arkansas offense change, if at all, with Malik Hornsby starting?
Yeah, that was another thing we asked today. How much adjusting do you have to do when you're going to give Hornsby the reins? And Hornsby is a similar kind of quarterback. I think headed into that Mississippi State game, there were questions about his abilities as a passer. I don't think he had attempted a pass before that. He had come into the Outback Bowl at the end of last season when Jefferson was hurt. And if he had attempted a pass, there had been very few and nothing that was going to really excite Arkansas fans. And his really special talent is he's really fast. He's not a runner in the same way that Jefferson is. Jefferson is really physical, and he's going to run you right over. Hornsby is going to run right past you. But Hornsby really showed against Mississippi State that he's a passer as well. He had like 230-something yards. He threw 2 picks and a touchdown, and Arkansas lost that game. But it was kind of a coming out party for Hornsby because it was a lot more than a lot of people expected from him as a passer.
So I guess going to the rest of Arkansas's offense, obviously they're great at running the ball, but when it comes to passing, was that more of just Hornsby just sort of having a coming out party and taking advantage of Mississippi State's, I guess, weaker secondary, or does Arkansas really have great receivers this season?
Yeah, it's interesting. This Arkansas offense has really prided itself on balance, being able to beat you either way. But at receiver, they don't have a star the way that they do in the running game with running back Rocket Sanders. Their leader is Jaden Hazelwood, a transfer from Oklahoma, and he's their leading receiver. But he's had some issues as well, and they also spread the ball around a decent amount. They get it to Matt Landers, another transfer, Keytron Jackson Jr., who's a sophomore, and then tight end Trey Knox, who is a bit inconsistent. He can be really good, but he's also had two of KJ's interceptions this season have bounced off of Knox's hands. So he's got several options in the passing game, and none of them are particularly, game breaking guys. But he's got talent, and it just kind of depends. You never really know what you're going to get from them. But at the same time, they've been able to put together this really balanced offensive attack with Jefferson leading. And with Hornsby, I think some of that was, like you said, Mississippi State not really knowing how to handle him. And like you said, that secondary struggling. So I think it was a combination of things. And it's not that Arkansas's receivers are bad. It's just that you don't really know what's going to happen with them on any given Saturday.
So let's talk about last Saturday then. Arkansas obviously had a tough loss to Liberty. Now, Liberty is a very good team that should be ranked more and more polls, and they obviously have a great football coach. But Arkansas, in a lot of ways, if you look at just the eye test, they look like the more bigger athletic team, and they probably should have won that game. Putting KJ Jefferson aside and his injury that he was dealing with, did Arkansas just play down to their competition, so to speak, or did Liberty simply just expose bigger flaws in the Arkansas team?
Yeah, that's really been the question all week that we've been trying to figure out is just what happened because, I think people are forgetting that Liberty is a very good team. But you're right that Arkansas probably should have beaten them. And I think a lot of people thought that they would. And one of the big problems was the offensive line looked like from a different team. This offensive line has been really strong. They've not really had to worry about them. They had a ton of veterans back from last year, and the offensive line just got mauled by Liberty. And they really had a hard time protecting an already injured Jefferson, who was just struggling to begin with. So that was a really big key, was that Liberty was just breaking into the backfield left and right. And then Arkansas's secondary has been a big problem all year, and they were getting burned on some deep balls and giving up a lot of touchdowns. The defense did hold Liberty scoreless in the second half, which I think I know I kind of overlooked that on thinking about how disappointing the game was. So that was one good thing, but it's still, the offense was so ineffective that it didn't really matter. And that 2-point conversion play at the end was a heartbreaker, but it shouldn't have had to come down to a 2-point conversion play.
All right, so I was going to move on to the LSU matchup specifically, but since you brought up the defense, Arkansas has one of the highest graded cornerbacks in the SEC, and former LSU player Dwight McGlothern, who everybody here knows. And they have the leading tackler or second leading tackler, I think, in Bumper Pool, and Drew Sanders also leads the SEC in sacks. But statistically speaking, like you said, they've been the second worst pass defense in the SEC. They're giving up 4 yards per rush on the ground. They're third worst in scoring in the defense. And Barry Odom is a really respected and good defensive coordinator. So what's been the problem?
They're dealing with a lot of injuries in the defense as well, especially in the secondary. So they lost Jalen Catalon, who was, their preseason All-American safety. He had a season-ending injury in the opener. And then they lost another guy in cornerback Ladarius Bishop to a season-ending knee injury not long after that. So they lost those two guys, but at the same time, I don't think either of those guys, Catalon obviously is a huge talent, but I don't think, Catalon can't cover everybody. So, I think the problem really is, there's just a talent differential and they don't have the guys that they need in the secondary. And it's been a really big issue. And they finally, against Liberty, they had all the guys back in the secondary that they were going to get back, everybody who wasn't those players whose seasons have been ended with injuries, and they still had problems. They were excited to get Malik Chavis back in the secondary and start him. And then he got burned for the first touchdown that Liberty threw. So, it's been inconsistency. But like you said, Drew Sanders and Bumper Pool have been really great in the linebacker core, but Poole's playing hurt. Poole's dealing with a hip, and he's playing with some kind of minor injury that they're now kind of holding him out for some series as well and putting a guy in Chris Paul Jr. in there sometimes. And so they're really just having to do a lot of shuffling, moving guys to positions they're not used to playing, things like that. So it's been injuries, but it's also been just a talent struggle.
So moving on to LSU, this game for LSU fans, it was always sort of a letdown game because usually it was LSU was playing a bigger rival in, Auburn or Alabama or even Florida. And recently it's been Alabama. And Arkansas has always been kind of the letdown spot afterwards because Arkansas would get up for LSU and LSU would have an emotional come down. So does Arkansas do they still see LSU as sort of their biggest SEC rival on their schedule, or has sort of another SEC team taken that mantle?
Yeah, the rivalry situation is really interesting because, Missouri is now who Arkansas plays at the end of the year for that quote unquote rivalry weekend matchup. But, Missouri being relatively new to the league, there's not a ton of, it doesn't have a rivalry feel to it, at least not yet. And I think LSU still does. But I think, Arkansas has a rivalry with Texas. Obviously, they don't play them that often, but will coming up soon. So I think that's going to emerge as a huge rivalry because of the history there. Texas A&M has been a rivalry that has been really strong because of that, playing over in AT&T Stadium and everything like that. So I think LSU is still up there. I think that it's probably less than it was when they were playing at Thanksgiving every year, but I think that's a pretty storied rivalry, and I think there's a lot of excitement around this matchup every year and trying to get that Golden Boot trophy.
So, getting, I guess, to the game specifically with LSU, you obviously named some negatives and some injury problems, but let's talk about the good with Arkansas. Not only is what Arkansas is doing well, but also what's a matchup specifically that could give LSU some problems?
Yeah, I mean, I've been looking at this LSU offensive line because it seems like they've really improved recently, but they've got some freshmen. They've had to do a lot of shuffling on this offensive line, and it's been a bit of a roller coaster. And now they're playing really well, and Pittman is really high on them. Brad Davis and Pittman have a great relationship, and so I think this offensive line for LSU is playing a lot better. But I mean, like you said, Arkansas has two of the SEC's leading or sack leaders in Drew Sanders and Jordan Dominic, and I think if they can get into the backfield, that would be huge for them. They need to try to keep Jaden Daniels off balance if they can, and maybe hit him a little bit. So I think that would be a really big strength. And then obviously the running game, Rocket Sanders. People haven't been talking about him this week because Liberty did a really good job of limiting the run game, especially early on. But Rocket Sanders is leading the league in rushing. He's got so many 100-yard rushing games. He's already crossed the 1,000-yard threshold. And he's been kind of this team's star, and, they can give him the ball and really rely on him. So I think if he can get back to his normal ways, after that disappointment against Liberty, then I think he can be a really big threat against LSU. And I'm curious what the LSU run defense can do with him.
Do you expect Arkansas, their offensive line, to get back to form this week at all? And do you think that, I guess, that in fact it was sort of a look-ahead spot for Arkansas last week?
Yeah, I mean, I do expect the offensive line to be better. I don't expect them to have as hard a time as they did against Liberty, but it's so difficult to explain because, it was Liberty. LSU, I'm guessing, I haven't, done the comparison of the numbers, but I'm guessing LSU's defensive front is a lot bigger than Liberty's. And so that's going to be a really big challenge, and it's going to be a confidence problem, but this is a group of veteran guys. And I think that if any team, if any group could bounce back from that kind of disappointing late season performance, then I think it would be this kind of senior offensive line. And that's something Arkansas really, really needs. They can't afford, especially if KJ's playing, they can't afford to let LSU get back there and put him on the ground too much.
She's Christina Long. Thank you so much for being on here. Y'all can follow all of Christina's stuff at swtimesrecord.com. You can follow her on Twitter as well. Christina, tell people where they can find some of your stuff elsewhere and where they can follow you on social media.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Christina Long 00. And then, yes, the Southwest Times Record, swtimes.com and at Times Record on Twitter as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Christina. Enjoy the game Saturday.
Thank you, Nick.
Thanks for listening to Out of My League. If you like what you heard, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Or follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok in the description link below.